So let's talk about the basic structure of a business. As we covered in previous modules, investors bring money into the business. So they invest for an expectation of return. They usually sit outside the business, that's why there's this line here, and they may provide initial or ongoing funds to run the business. Management you can think of as the eyes of the business. Not only do they oversee the entire operation, but they also provide strategic vision, direction, and they report directly to the investors. Sales and marketing you can think of as the lips of the business, because they make the promise to the customer on behalf of the business to deliver a particular product or service. That's where operation comes into the picture. Operations you can think of as the hands of the business. They deliver the service or products promised by sales and marketing to the customer. So these are the core divisions of any business. Below those sit what I would call the tools of a business. You've got human resources, which handles anything employee related. IT, any technology, software, hardware that's required by management, sales, marketing, operations to do their job, as well as finance that manages the internal flow of money throughout the business. And that, in a nutshell, is the structure of a business. When you're selling to a company, you have to understand the organizational chart, but more importantly, who are the decision makers in that organization. Now, as an example, we're going to take a slightly larger than ITEL telemarketing business and see if we can find the decision makers. Now, just to give you a quick overview, GM stands for General Manager, who is one person in the management group. The head of the sales and marketing team is the sales manager. The head of the operational team is the ops manager. There's one person that covers HR and finance, but has no one underneath them. The sales manager has 2 sales representatives underneath her. The ops manager has 2 campaign managers underneath her that run the individual lead generation campaigns. And then each of those has a team of telemarketers underneath them. Okay, let's assume that the general manager has engaged an IT consultant and they're looking around for new telemarketing software. So the question is, who would make the decision as to which telemarketing software, or even if the company would implement a new telemarketing software in operations, who would actually sign off on that? Would it be the general manager or would it be the operational manager? Now the answer is, it depends. It depends on the actual cost of the software. If the cost of the software was, for example, $3,000 and it was fixed. Now, $3,000 in the general scheme of the business probably could be approved by the general manager. However, if the software costs $6,000 per year, then it would very likely be the investors who have the final say. Now, this just illustrates that in an organization, you may think you know the decision maker, for example, the general manager or the ops manager, but what it actually comes back to is, what is the size of the deal, for example, $3,000 or $6,000 every year, and how does that affect the ROI of the business? And depending on the price of the software, it could have a negligible or a serious impact on ROI. And that will very much determine whether the decision is made by the ops manager, the GM, or indeed goes all the way up to the investors. And this can change depending on the current size of the company, the current budget, even the current quarter and how well they're doing. From quarter to quarter, the decision could go to investors or the general manager or the ops manager. However, if you were to ask in this organization, they would most likely tell you the general manager is the decision maker. So this, I'm just trying to illustrate here, is that even in an organization, they may not know themselves what is the decision-making process and who will finally sign off on the deal. So it's very important to understand that. ROI is key. You must look at the fundamental business figures, the financial health of the company, to determine, is your deal going to affect it negligibly or seriously impact it? And that will give you an indication of where you should be targeting in terms of decision makers. Now that leads us to influencers. What are influencers? They're anyone that can directly or indirectly impact the decision of decision makers. So for example, if in a particular case the general manager was the decision maker, you may think that the influencers are simply her direct reports. However, it's a little more complicated than that. Influencers can come from a variety of sources. For example, the external IT consultant could be an influencer. So they don't even exist in the hierarchy, and therefore you may not spot them, but they will definitely influence the decision in this particular case. For the other case is that you may find that even though a direct report, for example, the HR and financial staff, they may have no influence at all over the general manager. So official reporting lines may not apply. The other thing is there may be people further down in the organizational chart who have a particular relationship and can actually influence particular decisions. And they're also hard to find because they are in the organization, but they may be much further down the organizational chart. So that's important to take care of. And they may be in different departments, they may be even in different countries, but they may influence decisions with the general manager. So they're important to identify during a sales opportunity. So in any organization, there are 4 kinds of staff that you can categorize any person in the organization as. Now let's start with the first one, the general manager. So in this particular example, the general manager has both authority, so we'll represent authority as a crown, and influence. So the GM has influence with authority, and the influence symbol will represent as a loudspeaker. Okay, so the second category of staff is someone who has influence but no authority. Now, a good example here is the IT consultant. So the IT consultant has no formal authority in the organization, but because they have the ear of the general manager, in this particular case, in the example of buying the telemarketing software, they are a non-authoritative influencer. So no authority, not in the organizational chart, but has influence. The other category is people who have no influence but have authority. So for example, there's none in this particular example, but it could be someone who has the title of a CIO, but has no real influence in the organization. There could be a variety of reasons why that may occur. Maybe they're about to retire, maybe they're soon to be replaced, or maybe there's a restructure going to happen in the company. Maybe they've been promoted simply because of political reasons. However, they don't have the influence that goes with their authority. The other general category of people is those with no authority and no influence, and that's generally speaking in an organization the majority of staff. However, often when you talk to people in the organization, they'll tell you they have both authority and influence. And it's up to you as a salesperson to be able to distinguish who really has authority and who really has influence.